What's up? It's Paul from Guitar World, and as you may be aware or not, Summer NAMM has been canceled. But that doesn't mean there's any shortage of new products and launches. So because you can't be there, we're going to bring all that stuff to you. So let's dig in and check it out. Before we get started, I want to give a big shout out and thank you to Blue Mics for providing this Yeti X microphone, the boom stand, all of this to make me sound incredible on my end. I am happy to be joined here today with Phil, aka SoloDallas Olivieri from the Schaffer-Replica. Now, of course, Phil, I know that you to be a big ACDC fan, and this is sort of like the impetus of what these pedals and that tower, which you can probably see here, which is the original Schaffer-Replica, which these pedals are kind of based on. So can you just take me through, tell me about, your pedals here and the whole company?
Well, of course. First off, thank you. And secondly, hello to everyone who is joining us or just listening or looking around. I'm so happy about this because this was my life dream come true. So yes, you said it, of course, correctly. I've been in love with that particular band, ACDC, for so long. And they have always represented for me the best, and of course this is debatable because it's subjective, but for me, they represented the best electric guitar tone available. And so during my life, I always try to take that as a reference, and that took me to study in depth those sounds coming from those albums back in that day. So while studying this, trying to replicate most faithfully, as faithfully as I could, those sounds, I came to discover that one particular device had been used widely and wildly, I should say, by Angus Young, the lead guitarist, in those years, and that was affecting the sound of that particular guitar player, Angus Young, again, massively. The name of that device was the Schaffer-Vega diversity system, a very complex name that is meant to signify that we're dealing with a wireless system with dual antennas, essentially a dual receiver. That was invented or just augmented, modified and perfected by inventor Kenny Schaffer, who partnered in the mid-70s with Company Vega Corporation that was here in California, actually. And Kenny Schaffer instead was and still is from New York. So I discovered that wireless system had been used not only live by Angus Young and many others, but in the studio. I couldn't believe it. I wanted to know why Angus Young considered that particular wireless system an effect. In fact, the phrase that really did it for me was in a 1984 interview where the interviewer for the magazine says, "So Angus, what effects do you use?" And he goes, "Well, I only use a Schaffer-Vega. For me, it's probably the best." And that's my impression of Angus Young. So,
I had met you at a show, and we had talked about in depth about the Schaffer-Vega system, and you actually have a tower there. Now, of course, that is really for the diehard, guitar players who really want that authentic Angus Young, that quintessential sort of Marshall type of sound, which adds a layer of at least to my ears, some really great harmonics and some slight compression. So it's all there. It actually just takes that Marshall sound and just intensifies it in a way that just makes it just bigger and better, at least to my ears.
Well, your ears are very spot on, Paul, and that's exactly what it does. And it was designed to do exactly that by the Schaffer and Vega guys back in the day. Essentially, they wanted to make an audio circuit, not only for the guitar, I have to say, bass was very much used as well with the system, as well as microphones. In fact, Mick Jagger is probably amongst the very first guys that started using the Schaffer-Vega for vocals, of course, on the stage.
By today's standards, most players may not want something that big unless you're going for authenticity. But what I do appreciate is that you've basically distilled that sound and maintained its integrity, or the signal integrity, in these two pedals that I have here, which you just launched. One being the Classic, which is basically the Schaffer replica of the Tower, and then this newer pedal here, which is the Schaffer Replica Storm, which has an additional control.
Although it's a new company, relatively new, but everything already has a deep history, because we started working right off the bat. As soon as I put together the very first, we call it Tower because it's got that, aside from the pedals, of course, those came right, I think 3-4 months after the first Tower was made. And the first Tower went straight to Angus Young. He called us to Vancouver. They were about to record what became for now at least, the last ACDC album. And we met with Angus, and I gave him as a gift the very first serial number 001 Tower. Now, that Tower, which was not wireless, of course, it was just like a pedal with the audio circuitry of the Schaffer-Vega wireless system, but it wasn't wireless. I didn't want to have anything to do with outdated wireless systems of the 70s. Nobody would want to have anything to do with that to capture the sound. So right after Angus did that, of course, and he loved it, and he asked us for more Towers because they recorded the album, and then they started touring just a little bit a time later. So I wanted to have a pedal for the world. I wanted this sound, which is not only, Paul, the sound of ACDC. This is, in the words of ACDC's sound producers and sound engineers, and Angus himself and Malcolm, it's the clean, dirty sound that's so popular back in the day. And this pedal, this circuitry was just a great analog circuit designed by the Vega and Schaffer people, just to make everything sound better, to give you more, to supply for a potential loss of signal, for the wireless days of the 70s, where that could actually happen. So they wanted everything, to be at least a little better. The original intention was to just maintain a transparent one-to-one signal as much as possible. But in the word of Ken Schaffer, he told me, "Phil, I evidently failed at that." Thank himself. So we have a very important coloration of the sound. Now, the first pedal that we made right after the Tower that we gave Angus Young was what we call today the Classic. That pedal was the state of the art of our reverse engineering of the system 6 years ago. After that, Paul, we went back and we studied again such complex wireless system of the 70s, completely made in the US and designed by Americans and all that. And it means to me, because I'm still locked in that decade, and specifically here in the US, I live in that past. Those are my days. That's my time that I love so much. So we made that pedal, and after thorough reverse engineering of the wireless device, we came out with a Storm. The Storm also has a slightly different internal electronics, because I wanted a pedal that was 9 volts center negative, truly for all the people of the world, while the Classic still retains the engineering of 6 years ago for whatever we could make it. That's a German, Austrian, Italian production, and we also wanted to retain that particular version of the pedal because it was very successful and it still sells greatly today. However, that was 12 to 15 volts. So it's got a slightly different headroom and a different kind of power and punch. And the Storm, of course, has its own difference. So in actuality, they are two slightly, or not so slightly, flavors of the same trio of sound that was provided by the wireless device.
I tried them both, and right. It's two of the sort of two of the same flavor, but with the slightly different slightly different results depending on your power supply. And as you said, there's a lot different headroom space here. But the thing about them that's very important that most people will tend to think it's like, well, this must be some sort of overdrive or boost, and it's not. It really isn't. It really is something that enhances the tonal integrity of an amp, and it's been most specifically a Marshall amp. It sounds like I ran this through some of my vintage Marshalls, and I was just like, man, that's it. There's that sound. It's an incredible pedal.
You remind me of what Tony Platt said. Tony Platt was the engineer for Back in Black, and what he kept on saying is, guys, the most important thing with his British accent, and I interviewed Tony because I'm so much and so much on those years, and he said, Phil, for me the most important thing was not to screw up what I was hearing, what I was listening to, and that being the ACDC as a band. So Paul, what I needed to do, my mission was to not screw with the circuitry, with the integrity of that sound. And my mission was to get it as close as possible to that complex and the complexity of that wireless system, making it a non-wireless audio only related device that could be used simply and with simplicity. You can't do wrong with those pedals. You can't overdo them. There's no such a thing. So that was my mission, Paul. And by hearing you say that, when you plugged it in and that was it for you, I cracked a big smile, we say here, because that's true, my mission that badly.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it. And again, I think you said it best. It's simple. There's a transparency. It adds nothing but brings out all the complexities of your amp, and it just makes it sound just bigger and better. I mean, I did a little research, so I urge anyone to, if they don't believe me, just to actually go find some of your videos on these two pedals of you going through some ACDC classics, turning the pedal on off, and you're like, it's amazing the sonic difference, the before and after. You go from going, that's it, there's that sound, that's the sound right there.
That's it, Paul, and thanks again. Of course, I have the obligation to mention that it doesn't only work for ACDC. Many other artists actually used it. One amongst them all is David Gilmour. For example, with Pink Floyd, he used the device continuously for 10 years. Now, if you think, Paul, nowadays with the obsolescence that some of the technology rapidly gets into, 10 long years from 1979 to at least 1989, it's documented a period of usage by David Gilmour. And we also know that David Gilmour was never such a overdriven or oversaturated kind of guitar player. Actually, here again we have that clean, dirty, and very sustaining, stingy singing, I would say, solo sound on his Stratocaster, or whatever type of guitars he would use with the system. And so that's another, once again, it's the way that the circuitry is able to adapt and what it's able to do for a wide variety of instruments and amplifiers.
Well, I love it. I think, like I said, what you've done is, what these pedals do is really, they just add an enhanced layer to your existing sound. And it's a wonderful job here. And like, bravo for you, sort of keeping that sort of past alive, but more in an updated form that most guitar players are going to want to, to explore and discover on their own by using these pedals. I mean, they really are tonal enhancers, and especially if you're one even to plug straight into an amp, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a Marshall. Just about every amp you plug this through, it adds like that extra layer of harmonics and definition. It's fantastic. So I want to say thank you for just showing this, like I said, the classic and the storm. I urge anyone watching this to certainly check these out and discover them for yourself. And my last question to you before I leave you, since you're the big ACDC guy, and this is sort of, the genesis of where this all started. Angus has had a lot of different guitar sounds. I mean, it's always been Marshall, but if you compare the guitar sound from, say, Power Ridge to Highway to Hell to Back in Black, they're all, to Let There Be Rock, it's very different sounds. Was there a particular era or a certain album that kind of set you like, well, that's the sound right there?
That's Back in Black for me.
Back in Black, huh?
It is for me, Paul. And by the way, you just asked me, and we're almost in the exact date. In fact, just a few days from now, particularly on the 25th of July, it's recurrence of the 40th anniversary of Back in Black coming out. So I'm actually involved with Sony and ACDC as of now in the Back in Black 40th anniversary campaign, just to remember the world, just to remind, the world that this great and life-changing, I should say, certainly it was a life-changing album for me.
Phil, thank you so much for being a part of this. And again, Schaffer Replica, SoloDallas.com. Check out your stuff. You're doing a wonderful job here, and thank you for being a part of this. And I hope you're doing well, and we'll see you at a NAMM show soon, right?
Paul, we're doing great, and we want to thank you guys. I've been reading Guitar World since I don't even remember. I would get it in Italy, and I would read it, all right? So is it decades? I don't even know, okay? So thanks must go back right at you, and I cannot wait to see you guests again as soon as possible, as soon as this period in our lives is done, which is, I'm sure of that. I can't wait to see you again.
Fantastic. Well, I hope to see you soon. Ciao.